If you've been literally anywhere on the internet in the last 3 to 6 months, but honestly, the last year, you've probably heard the word ChatGPT. But how, as a podcaster, can you be using it? And this is where we're going to start. How should you not be using it? That's what we're digging into today in this completely human and in no way AI episode of the podcast. Welcome to the More Profitable Podcast with Stacey Harris. I'm Stacey, and this is the spot to learn more about the strategies, tactics, and tools you need to build your more profitable podcast. My team and I work every day with podcasters like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of your sales team, because your show should be built to generate and convert leads. So let's get into it. Welcome to episode 596. We're kicking off some things here this week, today with this episode. We are in the final 4 episodes before we hit episode 600. We've got this one today. We've got a great one for you next week on podcast mistakes. We are talking about, I'm looking at my calendar here now because I totally forgot what I'm recording today. And then we are going to be digging in on making the most of your show notes, because there's some things we need to talk about there. And then we're gonna our finale, our 599, as we wrap up the 500 series of this show, we're gonna talk about changing your process. All of this is sort of a countdown to episode 600, which we will kick off in May. The week this episode is released. So today, the episode dropped. It's April 5th, assuming you listen to this that day. Monday, April 3rd, a couple days ago, we started a 30-day countdown. So we will be doing 30 days of video, counting down some of the lessons I've learned over the last 10 years and 600 episodes of the show. We're also going to be answering some of the questions that I got when I asked, hey, what would you want to hear from somebody who's done 600 episodes? So we'll be talking about that. Some of that we'll be talking about in our 600th episode, but here's the real deal. Some of those questions were too big for one episode, or to be in a mix of other questions in an episode. They needed to be their own episode. So they will be their own episode in probably May and June. But some of them are really easy, and there's just not enough room in episode 600. Otherwise, it's going to be like a 4-hour show to answer them. And so we thought, you know what would be fun is if we played around on social media a little bit, celebrated this incredible sort of landmark episode. Just as a reminder, 44% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3. So 600 feels like a big deal for us. I'm really excited. We've been doing this 10 years. So we're going to be talking about some of those lessons. You will see those videos wherever you follow us. So TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, LinkedIn, we're going to be posting them in all the places. So find the place you prefer to consume content and make sure we are connected. There'll be links to all of that in the show notes of this episode. And by the way, first episode of the month, quick reminder, we do have the podcast newsroom. Head over to podcastnewsroom.com to make sure you have subscribed. Listen to our April episode talking about some changes. Specifically, if you're somebody who's been using Anchor or Spotify for podcasters, sneak peek, make sure that you listen to that episode because there are some shifts happening there. I'm excited. April's a big month. We're gonna be doing some really cool things, and I'm super stoked to be counting down to episode 600. It feels huge. So today I want to talk about ChatGPT though, because this is something we're seeing and hearing everywhere. And honestly, I kind of had to talk myself into this episode because I think ChatGPT is really cool. However, some of the ways it's being talked about feels really gross to me and out of alignment and not a way I think it should be being used if I'm going to just be completely honest and transparent here. There are some ways that are being suggested that feel full on icky. And so we're going to talk today about, yes, absolutely, some ways you can be using ChatGPT. I'm going to be talking about how I use ChatGPT for this very show, but we're also going to talk about how I'm not using it and how I recommend you also not use it, because nuance. Because Ultimately, it's a robot and not you. So let's get into it by first talking about how not to use ChatGPT as a podcaster. First and foremost, it is not an end product. It is not a deliverable. And I choose that word really intently, knowing that most of the folks who listen to this show, all of our clients are service-based business in somehow. Even our coaches and consultants, they're providing a service, whether that service is training, whether that service is consulting, and there's always a deliverable. We have some sort of deliverable. That deliverable has to be a client-ready finished product. AI is not going to give you a client-ready finished product. It is not going to give you a deliverable. And so for the folks who are maybe feeling a bit tense around ChatGPT and AI content and the ramifications for writers and podcasters and creators, I want to add some clarification, because this is a fantastic tool. It's not a fantastic replacement. So this is something that we can use to help our process. It is not a replacement for our process, and it is not a deliverable. So there's not going to be a situation where I go put in 3 bananas generic keywords and get out a script that I pop into another AI tool where I get a voice, and pop that into another AI tool where I get a video, and now I have a video podcast that is completely AI that does all my selling for me. No, that's not where we're at. I'm not saying it's not where we're going to get someday. Who knows? But it's definitely not where we're at right now. You have to remember that ChatGPT, any of your other AI tools, they are bringing together content from however it gets content. Generally, it's being provided by a database of some kind. But what's getting popped out is not necessarily fact-checked. It is not necessarily written in a way a human would write. And it's definitely not your IP. Your IP is still in your head. So this is not an end product. This is not something that I want you to be using as a replacement for your planning and prep work. So how do I want you to use ChatGPT as a podcaster? How can ChatGPT support your production process as a podcaster, specifically as a podcaster who is looking to generate, educate, and convert right fit leads? Use it as a tool in your process. I love ChatGPT as an unbiased brainstorming buddy. That's the best value in it for me. Because I can go in and I can put in a working title, which is what I use when I start my outline. I can throw that in ChatGPT and get some ideas and evolve it into my outline and then riff. I don't do a script. I feel that I probably should have opened with that. I don't do a script. I'm not a scripter. I get really stuck in my head, if I'm honest, when I do a script. And so I'm just pulling together an outline. That's all I'm doing. And then it's my words and my voice and my expertise and my IP and my perspective. If I read off a script that ChatGPT kicked out because of my oh so magic 3 keywords, it might not be stuff I agree with. It might be wrong. There's nuance here. And I feel like we could turn that word into a drinking game on this show because I say it so much, but I say it a lot for a reason. It's important. It's critical. It is maybe the most important thing we don't talk about, especially when it comes to AI and content production. There's nuance there. Yes, this is an incredible tool. And I'm really loving using it as a way to do my sort of like business development, brainstorming. Again, this completely unbiased brainstorming buddy. We're working on a project. I'm creating something. And I, full disclosure, suck at titles. It's just not my wheelhouse. And so I dropped into ChatGPT what I was trying to create. And I'm trying to be secretive here, and that's dumb. But it's just a guide I'm building. It's going to be a little PDF and some workbook stuff, and it's going to help you sort of self-audit your show. I didn't know what to call it because I was like, I don't know what podcast self-audit was as far as I got. And so I kicked all of that into ChatGPT, and I said titles for a guide written for, and I wrote it all out, and I got a list of like 10. And now I'm not going to use any of them. I'll be honest. I'm not using any of the titles, but I am then opening up my headlines tool from CoSchedule and playing with titles based on what it gave me. I'm moving around words and I'm like, oh, I like this from here and that from there. And I got a couple of working titles. You know what else I got out of those titles? Podcast episode titles. I was like, oh, that's a really good perspective. I don't so much want that to be the whole center of the guide, but it would be a great podcast episode where I can use to promote the guide. That works. That'll fly. I'll buy that. And so again, I want you to be using this as your brainstorming tool. I want you to be using this as a research tool, not a deliverable creator. Not something that is going to give you the whole kit and caboodle. But what it is going to give you is a not empty. And oftentimes for me, getting even gibberish on a page is the only way I'm getting anything I have to write done. I especially love this for episodes where I know I need to get a little more basic than I'm probably getting because I live and breathe this all day long. So there are questions that don't even show up in my brain. It's just, they don't register. And so I'll go in and I'll say, 5, I'm trying to think of what I've used as ChatGPT prompts lately, but I'll go in and I'll say, I need 5 basic tips for beginner podcasters. I've never put that in, nor would I, but I'll put that in and I'll go, okay, yeah. There's some value here. And I'll pick out what is actually valuable and what's just rubbish, what's just absolute garbage. And I will find what works and I'll utilize that. And that's how I want you to be using that. I want you to be using this as a tool that you can partner with at your brainstorming stage as you're fleshing out an idea. And honestly, this is for me a great tool to sort of play with an idea. And I'm really avoiding saying playing with a bad idea because I don't know that I want to encourage that, but it's often where I'll turn a bad idea into a good idea because I'll have something I want to talk about, I want to say, and we've talked about this a lot, but it's not about what I want to talk about, right? And so I'll be like, there's a way to this. And so I'll play with ChatGPT for a while until I find a way to make what I want to talk about useful for you. Because the way I wanted to talk about it was like airy-fairy and fun, but it's not going to be impactful for you as a listener. And so I will roundtable this idea with the robots until I can find a way that it's workable for you and a way it's valuable for you. So that's how I'm using ChatGPT. I also really like it, again, for titling, starting to get some of those title ideas, get podcast outlines. Another way I'm using it, social media creation. So captions. So I will put in a link to a podcast episode I want to promote, and I'll get captions for a bunch of different social media platforms. And generally, they kind of suck. They sound exactly like the tweets we all wrote in 2015 and 2012. And hey, podcaster, come find. Like, it's bad. But what it is a first draft. I just saved myself a ton of time because the robot wrote my shitty first draft. I don't have to. So now I have a shitty first draft I can make good. And I really love doing that with the social content specifically, just because I've written so freaking much of it at this point. It's really nice to be able to be like, I just need the crappy first draft already done. Here it is. Now, how do I use all the stuff I know to make this sound like a human wrote it, and B, like it's something I would actually say and presents in a way that actually connects with my ideal clicker, who I want to listen, who I want to buy, who I want to spend time with, and or how does it repel those who I don't want to have listening, working with me on my calendar in my life. There are both sides of that coin, right, baby? So that's how I'm using ChatGPT. I'm going to keep this one brief because I want you to go play with ChatGPT a little bit. I'm totally down to have more of these conversations. If this was interesting and valuable and you want to hear more about how I'm using ChatGPT, or you have some interest in digging deeper in this with me, let me know. I have some ideas in the percolator, but I want to make sure it resonates with you. I want to make sure this is at all valuable to you. So let me know if that might be interesting to see how I'm using it, and I will find a way to deliver that. I would love to support you in that way. So head on over to Instagram or wherever and send me a message. If you are on, you're a subscriber to the podcast newsroom, as you should be, podcastnewsroom.com. Hit reply on any of the emails you get and let me know if this was interesting and we can talk about it more. We might do, if you're interested, we might do a training actually over on the newsroom. So let me know. Heads up, new month, April and May spots are now open for podcast strategy intensives. I think there's like 2 in each month. So if you would like to grab yours, I would do it sooner rather than later. I am super stoked to start this next round of podcast strategy intensives. I'm having so much fun with these. These are a blast. So head on over to uncommonlymore.com/intensive and find out all about podcast strategy intensives. We have made a shift. I realize I haven't shared this with you. We have made a shift. Before, you could go and just see what was available and book your podcast strategy intensive right there. That's not the case anymore. Now, there is an application, just like production, to sit down and talk with me, because what we're finding is there have been some requests for some customization around the deliverable, meaning some folks didn't want to walk away with a 12 or 15 week content calendar. They wanted to walk away with a strategy for their podcast rebrand or some clarification on how they're using their podcast in their business. They really just, they wanted 2 strategic hours with me and a 45-minute follow-up and a deliverable of that strategy. So we've gone ahead and put an application and a sales call on it so that you and I can make sure that we have established what your custom deliverable will be on the other side of that intensive before we get into the intensive. It helps you show up really ready to get the most of that time. It allows me to go through the audit process that I go through with an ear for what will be most impactful for you and the decisions you're making right then. It also gives me a container to help people make decisions in, which is maybe one of the most beneficial parts of working with me. If you ask the people who work with me, is I am great at making your decisions with and or for you. So let's get yours on the calendar, uncommonlymore.com/intensive. I'll see you there, and I will see you right back here next week. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Remember that content consumption does not make changes. So commit to doing something from today's episode. Maybe it's taking action on what we talked about. Maybe it's reaching out to me and learning more about podcast strategy intensives or what podcast production looks like with our team. All of that is over at uncommonlymore.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the podcast newsroom, I want to remind you that is a great next step. If you're not really sure what comes next, hang out over there. Get those exclusive private episodes. That's over at podcastnewsroom.com. And the last favor I will ask, because social proof is endlessly important for sure, is to leave a rating or review for the show. If you go to ratethispodcast.com/more, that's the easiest way to do it. But I would love to hear what you thought of the show, what you think of the show, and if the show has been helpful for you. I can't wait to chat with you. So this is just the start of the conversation. Reach out so we can keep it going. Talk soon.